What? STA-bar disconnect service required, and it said drive mode not available. So this week Ford sent me the most badass version of the new Bronco, the Bronco Raptor. And in this video, we're going to take a look at everything that I like and dislike about the vehicle, as well as incorporate my overall driving review and impressions in the second half of this video. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that to hear what I say about the driving dynamics. But overall, it is a very unique vehicle in the market, has a lot to offer, and is certainly the most capable Bronco you can buy. So my first like about the Bronco Raptor is going to be the capability and the feature set that it has to offer in terms of off-road performance. Now, as we know, this was one of the first production vehicles to be debuted and roll out with 37-inch all-terrain tires, which are some of the largest on a production vehicle still to this day. There are some others out there that tie it in that regard. But in addition, it comes with front and rear locking differentials as standard equipment, a front sway bar disconnect, all of the off-road skid plates underneath, including the modular front bumper, which is going to be winch capable. Of course, recovery points front and back, all the 360 camera systems, and just a ton of off-road gear that you really should have on a vehicle if you plan to take it off-road. Now, the Raptor version obviously takes this even further than the standard Sasquatch Bronco in the fact that it offers electronic dampers with several different drive modes and adjustments, which make it even more capable in terms of not only regular trail riding, but also the Baja desert running stuff you can do at higher speeds. So that is really why I do like the Raptor version of the Bronco and what sets it apart from some of the others in the lineup. Now, my second like with this vehicle is going to be the exterior LED lighting setup. Now, of course, from the factory, it comes with full LEDs, and the Raptor versions come with unique amber DRLs around the headlamp assembly, which helps distinguish it versus the standard Bronco. But it also comes with these integrated running lights that are amber in the middle of the vehicle. Because this vehicle is so wide, to meet regulatory laws, you do have to integrate these amber running lights here in the grille. And then, of course, the Bronco Raptor also comes standard with rigid LED pods as the fog lights. You can see the inner two are actually covered with Raptor branded covers because that is, again, a legal requirement from the factory that I think they can only have one fog lamp on each side of the vehicle. But as a whole, the exterior lighting is quite good. It does feature zone lighting on the sides of the vehicle as well via the mirrors. So if you need to shine light on the left or right hand side, you can control that on the inside of the vehicle. And overall, the exterior lighting setup is quite good from the factories for doing evening or nighttime off-road activities, camping, anything like that. It's really just one of the highlights of this vehicle. So my third like about the Bronco Raptor is going to be the off-road wheel and tire setup. Now, this one does have the optional forged aluminum beadlock capable wheels for about $2,000, but it also comes standard with 37-inch all-terrain tires. Now, the reason you want a larger tire for off-road is going to be the greater sidewall, ground clearance, and just the overall performance that the tire has to offer with the tread pattern and stuff like that. Now, this one having the optional beadlock capable wheels means you can also mount the tire in a fashion so it doesn't easily slip off at lower tire pressures, because typically you want to air down tires to, sub 20 PSI for the softer sidewall. So when you're running over rocks or harder obstacles, the tire can flex, do its job, and give you that performance and stability that you're looking for. And the beadlock capable wheels from the factory is a great option to have if you're looking to do this in a more hardcore off-road fashion. But overall, I really do like the BF Goodrich all-terrain TA KO2 tires. These come from the factory on many off-road vehicles, including the competitor to this vehicle, and I really don't have any complaints. This one might be a specific Ford branded one, Baja Champion, so there might be some fine tuning from the tire manufacturer for Ford on this, but I really do like this tire tread pattern. It's pretty quiet on road, it's very good off-road, and I've never had any real complaints about it. I know people have their preferences when it comes to wheel and tire packages for off-roading, but I really haven't had an issue with KO2s, so that is something I really do like about the Bronco Raptor. Now, my fourth like about the Bronco is the fact it comes with electronically controlled dampers. Now, this isn't an end-all be-all in terms of, enhanced off-road performance, but to me, for a vehicle in this price point, it's kind of to be expected and could enhance the off-road performance in several different environments. So this one has the Fox electronically controlled dampers, which is very cool. It's some of their latest technology, and the reason I do like it and enjoy it is because you can fine-tune it not only for on-road manners, but off-road manners as well. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this can do some serious Baja desert running, and the suspension helps enable that and for it to perform like it should in those types of environments where it's really harsh terrain and really hard on the vehicle. The suspension can actually do its job, absorb those bumps, absorb those jumps, because you can jump this vehicle in a fairly moderate manner from the factory, and the electronic dampers, of course, will do its job, firm up when needed, soften up when needed, and you can do a little bit of controlling inside the vehicle for that function as well. So on road, you can keep it fairly tame. There's also a sport mode, which helps stiffen it up for a little bit better handling and agility on paved surfaces. And of course, there are off-road functions as well, both manually selectable and automated selectable by the vehicle, depending on which drive mode you're in and the terrain you're covering, to adjust those dampers. And I really think in terms of ride quality and performance, it helps the Bronco Raptor set it apart from the competition. Now, my next like about the interior here on the Bronco Raptor is the steering wheel in specific. Now, the steering wheel has a ton of functionality. This one has the carbon fiber interior package, which gives you the carbon trim on the wheel. It has all of the functions for the Raptor, including the paddle shifters on the back, orange accent stitching, the dark Bronco, and the buttons for the mode select for the suspension, exhaust, steering, and R drive modes. But it's also a little bit thicker, has nice bolsters or beefier bolsters for you to grip when you're doing more performance types of driving here on the 9 and 3 o'clock positions. So if you're doing that kind of driving, you want a nice firm grip on the steering wheel, and there's actually indentations with thicker parts of the steering wheel, like I said, on the back sides, which makes gripping the steering wheel just that much easier. So personally, when I've been off-road, I think this is actually a very functional bit of the steering wheel, and I'm glad Ford took note and provided that to the driver. Now, my sixth and final like here with the Bronco Raptor has to do with the threaded insert as well as USB charging ports here on the top side of the dash. Now, located directly behind the locking differential, switchgear, sway bar disconnect, and some of your off-road functions, there's actually a threaded insert for you to mount a GoPro or other camera accessories, as well as a USB-C and USB-A charge port to plug that camera in and keep it charged up. I think this is a very innovative way to mount a camera inside the dash, for doing those off-road activities. Most people want, a camera mount or add a camera mount via a suction cup, such as a GoPro or something like that, onto the vehicle, and Ford thought ahead and added this accessory mount for people to do it themselves in a very safe manner. So instead of blocking or adding bulk to the window, you can simply thread it into the dashboard there, plug it in, keep it nice and charged, and you're always ready to go, which I think is fantastic. And they've actually done this on other Ford vehicles as well, is added USB ports around the rearview mirror. I think on the new generation 2024 and newer Mustangs, they actually have USB ports for dash cams for a very similar functionality. So really do like how Ford added that, and I think other manufacturers should do that as well, quite frankly, as it's a relatively inexpensive and cheap thing to add, but very handy if you do plan to use this vehicle in its intended environment. So those are going to be some of my standout likes about the Ford Bronco Raptor. Obviously, there's much more to like about this vehicle, but now let's move into my dislikes and things I think Ford can improve in this generation of vehicle. So my first dislike with this vehicle is going to have to do with the overall cabin noise that gets on into the interior. Now, this vehicle is a hardtop Bronco, which is fairly common, and I believe the Raptor comes standard with the hardtop. But this inherent design of vehicle with a removable top is going to allow a little bit more cabin noise inside, as you can't quite seal out all of the cracks and crevices and points where noise can enter. But inside this vehicle, I specifically think it might be just a hair louder than the main competitor of this vehicle. And it is something, if you're driving 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, it does allow a lot of wind noise and intrusion in the cabin, and it gets quite loud. Now, luckily, the stereo can compensate for that just a little bit. It gets plenty loud to overcome the wind and road noise. But when you combine this with the all-terrain tires, and everything else that can enter the cabin, it just gets quite loud, and it's personally a negative to a type of vehicle like this if you're using it on a day-to-day basis, specifically at higher speeds. Now, my second dislike has to do with that number right there in the upper left-hand corner, 15.1 mpgs. Now, the Bronco is actually rated at 15 city, 16 highway, and believe it or not, I actually met the highway MPG figures quite well, but that number has steadily dropped after doing my short trip of around 150 miles total out on the highway. It has been steadily dropping, which means I was probably getting 13 or 14 mpg in the city or slower speed drivings, which is just below the EPA rating. Now, again, that might not be a point that most people care about in this type of vehicle, but that is quite poor MPG, and it certainly will add up over time, and you won't get much more than 300 miles of distance for a full tank of fuel, and I'm pretty sure this vehicle takes premium fuel, which is even more expensive than regular. So 300 miles of total range is quite low for a gas vehicle, and 15 MPG certainly is not great. Now, my third dislike here on the interior of the Bronco has to do with the wireless charging pad. Now, in general, wireless charging pads are pretty hit or miss across the board. I know it's a top item to complain about for most people out there because they typically don't tend to work very well. And here in the Bronco Raptor, I would say this is no different. Overall, the wireless charging pad is a fair size. You can see there is a Pixel 7 Pro for reference, takes up the majority of the spot, but fits just fine. You don't want things moving around too much. So on the size side of things, really no complaints there, and it's fairly easy to access when the vehicle is in drive. But performance, I would say, has been mostly a miss. Typically, I'll set the phone down in there, drive around for a few minutes, and find that it's actually not charging anymore because it shifted just a little bit, or for whatever reason, the phone isn't in the correct spot. And I will say, when it does work, the phone heats up quite quickly, and it does get quite hot, which may prevent it from charging as well, depending on how long it is sitting in there. So this is something I would like to see improved across the board. This is not only an issue here in the Bronco Raptor, but many makes and models as well, is wireless charging pad performance. Now, moving on, my fourth dislike about the Bronco Raptor and Bronco in general is the fact that there are no rear AC vents. Now, I really couldn't believe this at first, so I had to look it up online just to verify that I was correct in seeing that there's no AC vents. And I found some threads on the Bronco forums saying Ford claims there are rear AC vents, they're just located underneath the seat. No, those are not rear AC vents. AC vents are located either on the rear of the center console, on the B pillars, or maybe in the headliner in a traditional SUV where it blows cold air on the occupants, not blowing cold air from the floor. That is a heating duct, in my opinion. So there are no rear AC vents in the Bronco Raptor, and the main competitor to this vehicle, the Wrangler, actually has them as standard equipment, no matter if you get a 2 or 4-door. And I think that is a big miss inside of the interior, is not having AC vents for those warmer times. You know, whether you got a pet or a passenger in the back seat, having vents either on the center console or, like I said, the B pillars would be a great option to have a more comfortable experience. And of course, if you have the top off, it's not going to be a big deal, but you still might want a little bit of cold air wafting on you from time to time if you're out in the sun or just parked in the shade and it's a really hot, humid day, something like that. Cool air feels nice. Now, my fifth dislike with this vehicle has to do with the fact that rearward visibility is quite poor. Now, this is partly due to the fact that the vehicle has an increased suspension, lift, and ride height over that of the standard Bronco, but also due to the fact that the spare tire takes up more space on the glass, as well as the third brake light on top of this. Now, believe it or not, I was in the GR Corolla just a few days before I received this vehicle from Ford, and actually was sitting behind one of these vehicles in the Corolla and actually took a quick picture. Now, after driving the Bronco Raptor for some time, I now realize that driver likely could not see me out the rear view mirror of their Bronco Raptor because the GR Corolla sits a little bit lower, and this vehicle just is overall so big. So after driving around, rearward visibility and the interior rear view mirror is quite useless, and you really do need to rely on the side view mirrors just to tell what exactly is behind you, because of course if you go to back up and something is behind the vehicle, you really won't notice it out the mirror itself. You have to rely on the backup camera, which I would say is a safety issue in some regard, and it would be nice if Ford could incorporate a digital rear view camera mirror inside this vehicle, because I think it would be quite useful and a good application for a camera mirror. So now that we have my likes and dislikes out of the way, I want to go ahead and give you my driving impressions and just how it was to live with the Bronco Raptor over roughly a week. Now, I'm going to come at this from a Wrangler owner's perspective or kind of mindset, even though I personally don't own a Wrangler. My parents have, both in the JK and JL generations, Sahara and Rubicon trim levels respectively, and I've spent many, many hours with both of those vehicles, both on and off-road, with several trips in either one out west and up north to certain trails. Now, the Bronco certainly is larger than the Wrangler, both in the 2-door and 4-door aspects, and you certainly feel it from driving it. Now here, this is the Raptor version, so obviously it is going to be the largest Bronco that they make, both in terms of a wide body as well as the overall height and just the physical dimensions of it. You certainly feel this compared to the Wrangler. And again, I know I have two-door experience with the Wrangler, but even with that said, even a four-door Wrangler is going to be smaller than this vehicle in its four-door configurations. And personally, I think that does impact maneuverability just a little bit, both on and off-road. If you're taking these vehicles on a tight trail, you do want generally the smaller vehicle, and that will certainly be the Wrangler. Now, with that said, the Bronco is quite impressive for its maneuverability, both here on the street and I'm sure on the off-road trails as well. But I still think it is quite competent in terms of its performance, given the overall feature set it has with the trail turn assist, all the locking differentials and stuff like that. Now, when it comes to the overall ride quality, I've been quite impressed by the Bronco's performance on the street on paved surfaces, as I've been unable to take it off-road. Now, going over my traditional rough section of road that I like to include in my driving videos, it soaks it up without an issue, and I would sure hope so, given the 37-inch all-terrain tires with the massive sidewalls, but also the electronic dampers and just the suspension setup in general with the independent front suspension and the solid axle out rear do a fantastic job of driving and handling the weight and size of the tires. I'm actually quite impressed at how well Ford was able to tune the suspension for on-road performance, given the off-road capability that the Bronco Raptor has to offer. So I think that is actually one of the stronger suits of this vehicle, that you actually can drive it on a day-to-day basis if you wish, and it is quite pleasant to do so. Now, I think some of that is to do with the independent front suspension versus that of dual solid axles on the competitor. But really, it's like I said, it handles quite well. It has plenty of drive modes, both for street and off-road duties, so you can kind of tune the suspension how you wish and play with some of the other drive modes for the transmission, steering, etc., and get the vehicle to how you would like it on a day-to-day basis. Now, getting on to the interstate here, I like this section because it gives you a little bit of handling. The Bronco certainly has quite soft suspension, and handling is not going to be a strong suit, although you can adjust the dampers into the sport mode, which surely stiffen them up just a little bit. And taking around this corner here at about 54 miles an hour, hear the tires kind of growling. Acceleration actually is not bad inside of this vehicle. It has 418 horsepower, 440 pound-feet of torque from the 3-liter twin-turbo EcoBoost V6. And again, considering the size of the tires and the mass that it's moving, the 10-speed compared to this engine really does offer quite decent acceleration, and I would say it's slightly above adequate. It's certainly not underpowered in any regards, and the only complaint I think I have in terms of the overall driving dynamics, considering this is an off-road vehicle, is going to be the cabin noise. Now, I did take this on a short trip on the interstate where I was going about 70, 72 miles an hour, and it's about what we're doing right now, and you can really hear the wind noise rushing inside of the cabin. Yes, you do hear the all-terrain tires just a little bit, but my main complaint is going to be the wind intrusion over the head with the hardtop, maybe a little bit around the windows as well. And one thing I noticed over my week with this vehicle, given that the temperatures have started dropping into the 40s and 50s outside, is it just feels a little bit drafty inside of the cabin. Now, I'm not exactly sure why this is. It just doesn't feel quite as insulated as I would like in a vehicle like this, and it feels particularly drafty down near your legs underneath the door panels. So like the bottoms of the door seals, feels like it does let quite a bit of air inside of the cabin. Even with the heater turned on, at 50, 60 miles an hour, it just feels drafty. The exhaust and the engine sound isn't quite bad for being a twin turbo V6. I will say, with the adjustable exhaust here on the steering wheel, and the overall power output, it is quite enjoyable even to drive here at 70 miles an hour on the interstate. So I guess my only real complaint in terms of driving impressions with this vehicle is going to be two things. The rearward visibility is extremely poor, to the point of you can't see certain vehicles behind you. You'll be looking in the rearview mirror, the spare tire and the third brake light take up so much of that rear glass that you actually cannot see behind you. I think that is actually a safety issue, and believe it or not, last week when I had the Toyota Corolla GR, I was behind the Bronco Raptor, a different one, and I didn't realize, but I was probably invisible to the driver of that vehicle because, again, that car sits so low, this thing sits so high, then you throw in the spare tire and third brake light that take up so much of the rear glass that you really can't see smaller cars behind you, whether you're driving or stationary at a light. So that's certainly a negative. And the second negative I have is the MPG figures that one should expect from this vehicle. It's rated at 15 city, 16 highway, and even though I did meet those MPG figures out on the interstate at about 70 miles an hour, about 15.5 MPG is what the computer said. In terms of city MPG, I would say one should expect probably 12, 13, maybe 14 MPG if you have a lighter foot. But if you're driving this thing, you know, spiritedly in town, it's not out of the question that you might see single-digit MPG figures, real world experience. So that's another negative. Yes, I realize it's an off-road vehicle, has, you know, 37-inch tires, but 15 MPG, really quite poor and definitely hurts you in terms of the pocket, because I'd probably recommend putting premium fuel inside of this vehicle, and then you combine that with the overall fuel tank size, and you'll be lucky to probably achieve 300 miles to a full tank of gas. What? Well, that's odd. I just got a warning on the dash just driving down the road here at 37 miles an hour. STA-bar disconnect service required, and it said drive mode not available. Not exactly sure what that's about, but hopefully we can figure that out. I assume that might be sway bar disconnect. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but whenever I try to change the damper mode not available. Looks like the exhaust works. Steering feel selection not available. My mode not available. But anyways, back to the interior of this Bronco. The one that I'm driving does have an interior kind of luxury package. I know packaging did change for 2024, and I don't think this one as equipped is actually available for 2024, including the color and some of the other options. This one has the leather and suede seats for $3,000, and I have to say the seats themselves are quite nice with the suede material. This one is kind of the Chicago Bear spec, or the Illini, if you will, from Illinois. Orange and navy blue throughout the entire vehicle, which is kind of funny. But the seats themselves are quite nice. They have power adjustments with power lumbar on both front seats. A lot of the materials are very durable and kind of rugged on the inside. But again, I have to say, for the price point and everything, that is kind of what you should expect. And I would say in some regards, it's slightly nicer than the Wrangler, but there are aspects of the Wrangler that I personally enjoy just a little bit better. So, you know, from a material standpoint, I would say deserving of the mid $90,000 price point. I'm not so sure about that, but I really do think the seats themselves are quite nice. It would be nice to see the ventilated seat functionality on these, again, given the price point and some of the other features that it has, but I totally understand probably why they didn't do that from a, you know, watertight standpoint. It does have heated front seats with heated steering wheel, which is certainly sufficient and necessary for colder climates, which we're going to here in the Midwest. But the overall interior layout and functionality is good. I like the buttons up here on the dashboard. They're very easy to use and very easy to access and quick to activate. Dual zone automatic climate control, the 12-inch infotainment system with wireless Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, fully digital gauge cluster, and all of your steering wheel buttons. This one also does have the carbon fiber interior package, which I would probably skip if I were to option one of these vehicles, given I don't think it adds all that much value for the price point that you're paying. But, you know, I think it's overall a solid interior. Haven't seen too many squeaks, rattles, or interior noises, which is good. But yeah, the seats themselves are nice, and the interior is kind of to be expected for this segment of SUV. And one other small aspect I did want to touch on is the premium sound system in this one. It's 10 speakers in nature, and from some of the reviews I saw when the Bronco first launched, people were complaining about the sound system, and given the fact that there's only speakers in the front and speakers all the way in the back, including the subwoofer, and really no speakers here in the middle because there's no crossbar to mount them. And I think Ford actually did a very good job tuning the sound system on this particular vehicle, because I really haven't had any complaints. I don't think it's obviously the most professional, you know, nicest sounding sound system out there, but it's certainly on par with the competition. And, you know, the separation between the speakers, again, I think they did a very good job doing the overall bias front to back. The bass is very strong out back, even on the neutral settings in terms of the EQ. And really no complaints there. It's really not as bad as I was expecting, given some of the other comments from reviewers out there. So I guess to kind of wrap up my overall impressions of the Bronco Raptor, well, I think it's still quite an outlandish vehicle, certainly not for everybody out there, and the price point kind of matches that perspective, given it does have, a mid $90,000 price point as equipped. But with that said, I have a more positive aspect than I was thinking in terms of its driving dynamics and overall performance. The engine is quite powerful, quite strong. It sounds decent with the valved exhaust. Again, given it is a turbocharged V6 engine. Interior is kind of what you expect in a rugged off-road vehicle. Durable, more hard touch materials, but the seat option in this one is very nice, and I have had no comfort issues whatsoever. The on-road behavior in terms of handling, suspension, stuff like that is very good with the electronic suspension. I think that's one key differentiating factor that I like over that of the Wrangler, is the fact that you can adjust the dampers. And steering response, given the 37-inch all-terrain tires, is amazing. I think for the money, this vehicle is a do-it-all vehicle. Now, would I recommend it for everybody to just drive on the street day to day? Absolutely not, because you're not doing this vehicle justice. But would I recommend this if you live in certain parts of the country, or just really want the off-road appearance, even though you may or may not take it off-road? Then I think it is an option to consider. It has good manners. The cabin noise is going to be the one larger negative aspect. So with all that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and or found something helpful. If you did, make sure to hit that like button below. Subscribe if you guys haven't already, and make sure to stay tuned for additional Ford vehicle content here over the next several weeks, as I have even a more extreme Raptor version coming. Now, I do want to give a huge thanks to Ford over there for sending this vehicle out for me to test and review for you guys. A very exciting opportunity, and I really do appreciate you guys watching and supporting the channel and making these opportunities possible. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Of the Bronco Raptor, do you own a Bronco, are considering purchasing the Raptor version, or are you just watching this video for entertainment purposes? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Stay tuned for additional Ford and other manufacturer content coming, and as always, hope to see you guys in the next one.